The morning fog hung heavy over Blackwood Ranch in rural Montana when ranch foreman Jake Sullivan discovered something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. In the farthest pasture, barely visible through the mist, stood a massive black Angus bull, alone and motionless beside an empty water trough. Jan had been the crown jewel of tech billionaire Marcus Whitfield's prize cattle collection, a 2,200-pound champion bull worth over $300,000. But now as Jake approached the fence line, he could see that Jan hadn't been fed or given fresh water in what appeared to be days, possibly weeks. "What the hell happened here?" Jake muttered, his breath visible in the cold morning air, as he climbed over the fence to get a closer look at the magnificent animal that had once been the pride of Whitfield's luxury ranch. Marcus Whitfield had purchased Blackwood Ranch 3 years earlier as a tax write-off and weekend hobby. The tech mogul, worth an estimated $2.8 billion, had spared no expense in creating what he called his pastoral paradise, importing championship cattle from across the country and hiring top-tier staff to maintain his collection of exotic animals. Jan had been the centerpiece of it all. Born from champion bloodlines and raised with meticulous care, the bull had won numerous livestock competitions and had been featured in agricultural magazines as one of the finest examples of Angus breeding in North America. But everything changed 6 weeks ago when Whitfield's latest tech venture failed spectacularly, costing him nearly $400 million in investor funds. Facing mounting legal pressures and a congressional investigation into his business practices, Whitfield had quietly liquidated most of his assets and fled to his compound in the Cayman Islands. "Mr. Whitfield just left," explained Sarah Martinez, the ranch's veterinarian, when Jake called her that morning. "He fired most of the staff, cut off funding for feed and supplies, and told us to figure it out. I haven't been paid in 3 weeks. Jake had been the only employee to stay, using his own savings to buy minimal feed for the dozen animals that remained on the 500-acre property. But his resources were limited, and he had been forced to make impossible choices about which animals to prioritize. Yen had been forgotten in the chaos. As Jake approached the bull, he could see the devastating effects of neglect. Yan's once glossy black coat was now dull and matted. His ribs were visible through his hide, and his eyes held a hollow emptiness that Jake had never seen in an animal before. "Jesus, Yan," Jake whispered, fighting back tears as he reached out to touch the bull's neck. "I'm so sorry, buddy. I didn't know you were still out here." The bull didn't react to Jake's touch. He simply stood there, staring off into the distance with the resigned acceptance of an animal that had given up hope. Jake quickly radioed for help, and within an hour Dr. Martinez arrived with emergency supplies. What she found shocked her to her core. "Jake, this animal is severely dehydrated and malnourished," she said after a preliminary examination. "His body condition score is maybe a 2 out of 9. He's literally starving to death." Dr. Martinez immediately began administering IV fluids while Jake worked to repair the water system that had been shut off weeks earlier. As fresh water began flowing into the trough, Jan lifted his head slightly, the first sign of life Jake had seen from him all morning. "How long has he been like this?" Dr. Martinez asked as she prepared vitamin injections. "I don't know," Jake admitted, his voice heavy with guilt. "When Whitfield left, everything fell apart so fast. I was trying to keep the horses and the breeding cattle alive. I thought someone else was checking on the bulls in the back pastures." The truth was that no one had been checking on anything systematically. When Whitfield abandoned the ranch, he had left behind not just animals, but an entire ecosystem of care that had simply collapsed without proper management or funding. As they worked to stabilize Jan, Jake couldn't help but think about the cruel irony of the situation. This bull, which had once been worth more than most people's houses, had been left to die alone while his millionaire owner sipped cocktails on a Caribbean beach. "Dr. Martinez," Jake said quietly, "what are his chances?" The veterinarian paused in her work, looking at Jan's emaciated frame. "Honestly, if we hadn't found him today, he probably wouldn't have lasted another week. Even now, the damage might be too severe. Severe malnutrition in cattle can cause organ failure, and I won't know the full extent until we run more tests." As the afternoon wore on, Jake and Dr. Martinez took turns monitoring Jan's condition. The bull had managed to drink some water and had shown mild interest in the hay they had provided, but his movements were slow and labored. "You know what makes me angriest?" Jake said as they sat watching Yan in the fading daylight. "Whitfield didn't just abandon these animals. He abandoned his responsibility. He treated them like stock market investments, valuable when profitable, disposable when not." Dr. Martinez nodded grimly. "I've seen this before with wealthy hobby ranchers. They collect animals like trophies. But when the novelty wears off or finances get tight, the animals pay the price." As night fell over Blackwood Ranch, Jake made a decision that would change both his life and Yan's forever. He couldn't save all the animals on the property, but he could try to save this one. "I'm staying with him tonight," Jake told Dr. Martinez. "If Yan is going to fight for his life, then I'm going to fight with him." Jake set up a small camp chair beside the pasture fence and settled in for what would be the first of many long nights. As stars appeared overhead, he could hear Yan's labored breathing in the darkness. "You're not alone anymore, buddy," Jake whispered into the night. "Whatever happens next, you're not alone." Little did Jake know that Yan's story was just beginning, and what the bull would do in the coming days would not only save his own life, but inspire an entire community and expose the dark reality of how the ultra-wealthy sometimes treat their investments. Have you ever witnessed an animal that was abandoned or neglected? Sometimes the strongest creatures are those who've learned to survive against all odds. 3 days had passed since Jake's discovery of Yan, and the bull's condition remained critical. Despite round-the-clock care and Dr. Martinez's expert treatment, Yan showed only minimal signs of improvement. His water intake had increased slightly, but he still refused most food and rarely moved from his spot near the fence. Jake had barely slept, spending his nights in the pasture with Yan, talking to the bull in soft tones and monitoring his breathing. During the day, he worked frantically to secure funding for proper medical care and feed for the remaining animals on the ranch. "Jake, you look terrible," Dr. Martinez said as she arrived for her morning checkup. "When's the last time you went home?" "Home is here right now," Jake replied, his eyes never leaving Yan. "This bull has been fighting for his life for weeks. The least I can do is fight with him." Dr. Martinez's examination revealed some encouraging news. Yan's hydration levels had improved, and his vital signs were slightly stronger. But the bull's psychological state remained deeply concerning. "He's given up," Dr. Martinez explained as she prepared another round of vitamin injections. "Cattle are intelligent animals with complex emotional lives. Yan has been traumatized not just physically, but mentally. He doesn't trust that food and water will continue to be available." Jake had researched Yan's background and learned about the bull's impressive pedigree and show career. "This animal was treated like royalty for years," Jake said. "Champion bloodlines, professional handlers, premium feed, the best of everything. And then suddenly, nothing. Can you imagine the psychological impact? If this incredible story of survival and determination is touching your heart, we'd be so grateful if you could hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more amazing stories like Yan's. Now let's see what happened that changed everything. The breakthrough came on the 4th day, but not in the way anyone expected. Jake was sitting beside the fence at sunrise, exhausted from another sleepless night, when he heard an unusual sound from Yan's direction. The bull was making a low, rumbling vocalization that Jake had never heard before. Not a moo or a bellow, but something softer, almost conversational. "What is it, boy?" Jake asked, standing up and walking closer to where Yan stood. That's when Jake noticed something that made his heart skip a beat. Yan was looking directly at him, making eye contact for the first time since his rescue. More importantly, the bull had moved nearly 20 feet from his usual spot and was standing near the gate that led to the main part of the ranch. "Dr. Martinez," Jake called out excitedly, "you need to see this." When the veterinarian arrived, she found Yan exhibiting behavior that defied everything she knew about severely malnourished cattle. The bull was actively walking around his pasture, investigating his surroundings and showing clear interest in the activities happening beyond his fence. "This is remarkable, Doctor," Martinez said, watching Yan's movements carefully. "Yesterday he could barely stand for more than a few minutes. Today he's walking with purpose." But Yan's behavior became even more intriguing as the day progressed. Instead of simply eating the hay and grain that Jake provided, the bull began to carefully sort through the feed, selecting only the highest quality pieces and leaving the rest untouched. He's being picky, Jake observed with amazement. A starving animal should eat anything, but Yan is making choices. Dr. Martinez was equally puzzled. It's almost like he's regained his sense of self-worth. Most animals in his condition would show desperate, survival-based eating patterns. But Yan is eating well, like the champion he used to be. Over the following days, Yan's transformation accelerated in ways that surprised everyone involved in his care. The bull began to groom himself, something he hadn't done since before his abandonment. He started responding to Jake's voice, approaching the fence when called and even allowing Jake to brush his coat. But the most remarkable change was in Yan's demeanor around other people. When ranch visitors came to see the abandoned animals, Yan would position himself prominently near the fence, standing tall and proud despite his still visible ribs and diminished weight. It's like he knows he's famous, Jake told Dr. Martinez during one of her visits. Word has gotten out about what happened here, and people are coming to see the animals Whitfield left behind. Yan seems to understand that he's become a symbol of something important. News of Yan's story had indeed begun to spread beyond the local community. Jake had started a social media account to document the bull's recovery and to raise funds for the other abandoned animals. The response had been overwhelming, with donations pouring in from across the country and media outlets requesting interviews. But Jake noticed something even more significant in Yan's behavior. The bull had begun to approach the sections of fence that bordered the pastures where other abandoned animals were housed. He would stand there for hours, making soft vocalizations toward horses, cattle, and goats that were also struggling to recover from neglect. I think he's trying to comfort them, Jake told a visiting journalist from the local newspaper. Yan went through hell, but instead of becoming withdrawn or aggressive, he's become more empathetic. It's like his suffering made him more aware of others' pain. Dr. Martinez documented this behavior in her reports, noting that Yan's recovery was following a pattern unlike anything she had seen in her 20 years of veterinary practice. Most animals recovering from severe trauma become either extremely fearful or food aggressive, she explained. But Yan is displaying what I can only describe as emotional intelligence. He's not just healing physically, he's healing psychologically and then using that healing to help others. As Yan continued to gain weight and strength, Jake began to realize that something extraordinary was happening. This wasn't just a story of animal rescue and recovery. It was a story of resilience, dignity, and the incredible capacity for growth that can emerge from the darkest circumstances. What do you think drives some beings to become more compassionate after experiencing suffering themselves? Have you ever seen someone or something become stronger and kinder because of hardship rather than bitter? 6 weeks into Yan's recovery, something unprecedented began happening at Blackwood Ranch. The bull that had once been left to die was now orchestrating what could only be described as a healing community among the abandoned animals. Jake first noticed it during his morning rounds. Instead of finding the animals scattered throughout their respective pastures as usual, he discovered them gathered near the fence lines that bordered Yan's enclosure. Horses, cattle, goats, and even the ranch's 3 remaining sheep had positioned themselves as close to Yan as their separate enclosures would allow. "This is incredible," Dr. Martinez said when Jake called her to witness the phenomenon. "I've never seen cross-species grouping behavior like this outside of extreme survival situations." But what was happening at Blackwood Ranch wasn't about survival. It was about something much more profound. Yan had begun what Jake started calling morning rounds. Each day at sunrise, the bull would systematically visit each section of fence that bordered other animals' enclosures. He would approach each group, make soft vocalizations, and somehow manage to communicate a sense of calm and hope that was visibly affecting the other animals. "Look at Bella," Jake pointed out, referring to a mare that had been so traumatized by abandonment that she wouldn't let humans approach her. "She's been eating regularly ever since Yan started his visits. And look how she positions herself. She's actually turned toward his pasture instead of hiding in the corner." Dr. Martinez was documenting behaviors that challenge conventional understanding of animal psychology. "Yan appears to have developed what we might call leadership qualities," she noted in her daily reports. "But unlike typical dominant behavior in cattle, his influence seems to be based on empathy and emotional support rather than physical intimidation." The transformation became even more remarkable when new rescue animals arrived at the ranch. Word of Jan's story had inspired donations that allowed Jake to rescue additional abandoned animals from other failed luxury operations throughout Montana. When a severely malnourished young bull named Cooper arrived from a bankrupt ranch near Billings, Jake was concerned about introducing him to the established group. Cooper was aggressive, fearful, and showed signs of severe psychological trauma from months of neglect. "We should keep him isolated until he stabilizes," Dr. Martinez recommended. "Traumatized cattle can be unpredictable, and introducing him too quickly could disrupt the positive dynamic Jan has created." But Jan had other plans. The moment Cooper's transport trailer arrived, Jan positioned himself at the fence closest to the unloading area. As the young bull was led to a quarantine pen, Jan began making the same soft vocalizations he used during his morning rounds. Cooper's reaction was immediate and startling. The aggressive posturing that had characterized his behavior during transport ceased completely. Instead, the young bull oriented himself toward Jan's voice and remained calm throughout the unloading process. "I've never seen anything like this," the transport driver told Jake. "That young bull was kicking and fighting the entire trip. But the moment he heard your big bull calling, he just settled down." Over the following days, Jake and Dr. Martinez observed what could only be described as long-distance therapy sessions. Jan would spend hours at the fence nearest Cooper's quarantine pen, maintaining a steady stream of gentle communication that seemed to have a profound calming effect on the traumatized young bull. "It's like Jan is teaching him that humans can be trusted again," Jake observed. "Cooper watches how Jan interacts with us, and then he slowly starts to imitate those behaviors." Dr. Martinez was particularly intrigued by the timing and nature of Jan's communications with Cooper. "He seems to know exactly when Cooper is most distressed," she noted. "If Cooper starts pacing or showing signs of anxiety, Jan immediately moves to the fence and begins his vocalizations. It's incredibly sophisticated social awareness." The breakthrough came when Cooper was finally cleared to join the general population. Jake had expected at least some territorial disputes or dominance challenges between the two bulls. Instead, Jan approached Cooper with the same gentle confidence he showed toward all the other animals. But what happened next left everyone speechless. Cooper, who had been so traumatized that he flinched away from human contact, walked directly up to Jan and allowed the larger bull to nuzzle his neck. It was the first voluntary physical contact Cooper had initiated since his rescue. "They're bonding," Dr. Martinez whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "Jan isn't just communicating with him, he's actively healing him." As news of Jan's unusual abilities spread, the ranch began receiving visitors from universities, animal behavior specialists, and even psychiatric researchers interested in studying the therapeutic dynamics Jan had created. Dr. Rebecca Stone, an animal psychologist from Montana State University, spent several days observing Jan's interactions with the other animals. Her conclusions were groundbreaking. "What Jan is demonstrating appears to be a form of trauma-informed care," Dr. Stone explained to Jake and Dr. Martinez. "He seems to understand that the other animals have experienced abandonment and neglect similar to his own, and he's developed strategies to help them process and overcome those experiences." Jake found himself learning as much from Jan as the researchers were. "I've been around cattle my whole life," he told Dr. Stone, "but I never understood how emotionally complex they could be. Jan isn't just surviving his trauma, he's transforming it into something that helps others heal." The ranch had become something unprecedented, a therapeutic community led by an animal who had transformed his own suffering into a gift for helping others. Jan's recovery was no longer just a personal victory, it had become a model for how trauma could be processed and transformed into wisdom and compassion. As Jake watched Jan conducting his evening rounds, moving from enclosure to check on each animal before settling down for the night, he realized that something extraordinary had emerged from the cruelty of abandonment. Jan had become not just a survivor, but a healer. Have you ever witnessed someone transform their pain into a source of strength for helping others? What do you think allows some individuals to become more compassionate rather than bitter after experiencing trauma? 3 months after Jan's rescue, Marcus Whitfield's world came crashing down in ways he never could have anticipated. What started as a simple animal abandonment case had evolved into a federal investigation that would expose the dark underbelly of his entire business empire. The catalyst came when investigative journalist Sarah Chen published her explosive expose titled "Billion-Dollar Betrayal: How Tech Mogul Marcus Whitfield Left His Prize Animals to Die." The article, featuring dozens of photos of Jan's transformation and interviews with Jake and Dr. Martinez, went viral within hours of publication. "This isn't just about animal cruelty," Chen wrote in her piece. "This is about the callous disregard that some ultra-wealthy individuals show toward any responsibility that doesn't directly benefit their bottom line." The public response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 24 hours, Number Justice for Jan was trending on social media platforms, and animal rights organizations across the country were demanding Whitfield's prosecution. But the real shockwave came when federal investigators realized that Whitfield's abandonment of his ranch wasn't an isolated incident of poor judgment. It was part of a systematic pattern of financial irresponsibility that extended throughout his business empire. Mr. Whitfield's treatment of these animals reflects the same disregard for fiduciary responsibility that he showed toward his investors, explained FBI Special Agent Michael Torres during a press conference. When things got difficult, he simply walked away from his obligations, regardless of who or what got hurt in the process. Meanwhile, back at Blackwood Ranch, Jan continued his remarkable journey of recovery and leadership. His weight had returned to nearly normal levels, and his coat had regained its glossy black sheen. But more importantly, his influence over the other rescued animals had created what researchers were calling the most successful animal trauma recovery program ever documented. Dr. Rebecca Stone from Montana State University had established a research station at the ranch to study what she termed Jan's therapeutic methodology. Her preliminary findings were revolutionizing understanding of animal emotional intelligence. Jan has developed what appears to be a systematic approach to helping traumatized animals, Dr. Stone explained during a televised interview. He assesses each new arrival's emotional state, provides consistent comfort and reassurance, and gradually helps them rebuild trust in their environment and caretakers. The ranch now housed 37 rescued animals from failed luxury operations across the western United States, and Jan had successfully helped integrate every single one of them into the community. But the most dramatic development came when Marcus Whitfield himself arrived at the ranch. Jake first spotted the black Tesla pulling up the gravel driveway on a gray October morning. He immediately recognized the license plate from photos he'd seen in news articles. MWHIT1. "Dr. Martinez," Jake radioed urgently. "You need to get out here. Whitfield is here." Marcus Whitfield stepped out of his car looking nothing like the confident billionaire from magazine covers. His designer clothes couldn't hide the stress lines around his eyes or the defeat in his posture. Federal investigators had frozen most of his assets, and he was facing multiple criminal charges related to his business practices. "I want to see Jan," Whitfield said without preamble when Jake approached him. "Sir, you abandoned these animals," Jake replied, his voice tight with controlled anger. "You don't get to just show up and—" "Please," Whitfield interrupted, and Jake was startled to hear desperation in the billionaire's voice. "I know what I did was wrong. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need to see him." Jake looked at this man who had once controlled billions of dollars and commanded respect in boardrooms around the world. Now Whitfield seemed small, broken, almost as lost as the animals he had abandoned. "Fine," Jake said finally, "but I'm staying with you every second." As they walked toward Jan's pasture, Jake noticed something remarkable happening. Word of Whitfield's arrival had somehow spread among the animals, and they were all positioning themselves at their fence lines, watching the procession with what appeared to be intense interest. Jan was waiting at his fence, standing tall and proud, his dark eyes fixed on his former owner. The bull that had once been worth $300,000 to Whitfield now represented something far more valuable, a symbol of resilience and the power of redemption. "Jesus," Whitfield whispered when he saw Jan. "He looks magnificent." "No thanks to you," Jake said coldly. Whitfield approached the fence slowly, his hands shaking as he reached toward Jan. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, boy. I failed you. I failed everyone." Jan regarded his former owner with calm intelligence. The bull didn't flinch away from Whitfield's touch. but neither did he show any sign of recognition or forgiveness. "He doesn't remember me," Whitfield said sadly. "He remembers," Jake corrected, "but you're not the same person who owned him, and he's not the same bull you abandoned. Both of you have become something different." What happened next surprised everyone present. Jan slowly moved closer to the fence where Whitfield stood, close enough that the billionaire could see the wisdom and strength that now defined the bull's presence. "He's become a leader," Dr. Martinez explained, having arrived just in time to witness the reunion. "Jan has taken responsibility for the well-being of every animal on this ranch. He's everything you weren't when you owned him." Whitfield stared at Jan for several long minutes, tears streaming down his face. "What can I do?" he asked finally. "How can I make this right?" Jake felt his anger giving way to something unexpected. Pity. This man who had once commanded billions now stood before them as broken and abandoned as the animals he had left behind. "You can start by taking responsibility," Jake said, "not just for these animals, but for everything. Face the charges. Pay back the investors. Stop running away from the consequences of your choices." Whitfield nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving Jan. "Will you let me help fund the ranch? Whatever money I have left after the legal settlements, I want it to go toward taking care of these animals." "That's a start, Dr. Martinez said. "But money isn't enough. These animals need commitment. They need someone who won't abandon them when things get difficult." As Whitfield prepared to leave, he turned back to Jan one last time. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for showing me what real strength looks like." Jan watched his former owner drive away, then turned and began his evening rounds, checking on each animal under his care. The bull that had once been a prized possession had become something far more valuable, a teacher, a healer, and a reminder that true worth isn't measured in dollars, but in the courage to help others, even after you've been broken yourself. Do you believe people can truly change after hitting rock bottom? Sometimes the most profound transformations come from facing the full consequences of our actions. 1 year after his rescue, Jan stood in the center of what had once been Blackwood Ranch, but was now officially known as the Healing Pastures Animal Sanctuary. The 500-acre facility had become the most successful animal trauma recovery center in North America, and Jan remained its unofficial but undisputed leader. Jake Sullivan, now the sanctuary's director, watched from the observation deck as a group of veterinary students observed Jan's morning routine. The bull's methodical visits to each enclosure had become a masterclass in animal-assisted therapy, studied by researchers from universities around the world. Every morning at exactly 7 a.m., Jan begins what we call his welfare rounds, Dr. Rebecca Stone explained to the students. He visits each group of animals, provides social support to those showing signs of distress, and somehow manages to maintain the emotional equilibrium of the entire community. The sanctuary now housed 87 animals rescued from failed luxury operations, bankruptcy proceedings, and neglect cases across the country. Jan had personally helped integrate every single one of them, earning him recognition as the first documented case of large-scale therapeutic leadership in cattle. Marcus Whitfield had kept his promise. After pleading guilty to multiple federal charges, he had transferred ownership of the ranch to a nonprofit trust and directed all his remaining assets toward the sanctuary's operation. He was currently serving an 18-month sentence in minimum security federal prison, but his monthly letters to Jake showed a man genuinely transformed by the consequences of his actions. "I watched the news reports about Jan and the other animals," Whitfield had written in his most recent letter. "Seeing what they have accomplished gives me hope that redemption is possible, even for someone who failed as completely as I did." Dr. Martinez, now the sanctuary's chief veterinarian, had documented remarkable health improvements in animals under Jan's influence. "We're seeing recovery rates that are 400% higher than conventional rehabilitation programs," she explained to a visiting delegation from the American Veterinary Association. "The animals here aren't just surviving, they're thriving in ways that challenge everything we thought we knew about trauma recovery." But Jan's influence extended far beyond the sanctuary itself. His story had inspired legislative changes in animal protection laws across 12 states, making it a felony to abandon livestock without providing for their care. The Jan's law provisions had already prevented dozens of abandonment cases by requiring liability bonds from luxury ranch owners. The sanctuary had also become a destination for human visitors seeking their own healing. Jake had reluctantly agreed to allow limited public tours after receiving thousands of requests from people who said Jan's story had inspired them during their own difficult times. There's something about watching Jan work with traumatized animals that helps people understand their own capacity for recovery, explained Dr. Lisa Park, a trauma therapist who had begun bringing her clients to observe Jan's sessions. His story proves that suffering doesn't have to define you. It can become the foundation for helping others. The morning tour group included a young girl named Emma who had been struggling with severe anxiety since her family's financial difficulties had forced them to give up their home. Jake watched as Emma positioned herself at the fence near Jan, drawn by the same calm presence that had helped so many animals heal. Jan seemed to sense the girl's distress. The massive bull approached the fence slowly, lowering his head until he was at Emma's eye level. His dark eyes, once hollow with despair, now radiated a gentle wisdom that seemed to communicate across species barriers. "He knows I'm sad," Emma whispered to her mother, reaching through the fence to touch Jan's nose. "But he's telling me it's going to be okay." Jake felt the familiar tightness in his throat that came whenever he witnessed these moments of connection. Jan's ability to provide comfort wasn't limited to other animals. He had somehow become a source of hope for anyone who had experienced loss or betrayal. Dr. Stone's research had identified what she called the Jan effect, a documented phenomenon where Jan's presence reduced stress hormones in both animals and humans within his vicinity. "We're seeing measurable biochemical changes in individuals who spend time near Jan," she explained. "It's as if his own recovery has generated a field of healing that extends to others." As the tour concluded and visitors departed, Jake remained at the fence with Jan. The two had developed their own daily ritual, a quiet moment of connection that honored everything they had been through together. "You know, boy," Jake said softly, "when I found you that morning, I thought I was saving your life. I didn't realize you were going to save mine too." Jake's life had indeed been transformed by his commitment to Jan. What had started as a simple act of compassion had become his life's calling. The sanctuary now employed 12 full-time staff members and had a waiting list of animals needing rescue that stretched months into the future. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Jan's story was how it continued to evolve. New animals arriving at the sanctuary were now met not just by professional caregivers, but by a community of previously traumatized animals who had learned to extend the same compassion they had received. Cooper, the young bull who had been Jan's first successful rehabilitation case, had developed his own therapeutic abilities and now served as Jan's lieutenant in welcoming new arrivals. Bella, the traumatized mare, had become a gentle mentor to horses recovering from neglect. The entire sanctuary had become a living demonstration of how trauma could be transformed into wisdom and pain into purpose. As evening approached, Jake watched Jan conduct his final rounds of the day. The bull moved with the quiet dignity of someone who had discovered that true strength came not from dominating others, but from lifting them up. "Thank you, Jan," Jake whispered as the bull settled down for the night, surrounded by the community of animals he had helped heal, "for showing us all what's possible when we refuse to let our worst moments define our future." Jan's story had begun with abandonment and near death, but through his refusal to surrender to despair, his choice to transform suffering into service, and his demonstration that healing multiplies when shared, he had created something unprecedented, a sanctuary where broken beings learn to help each other become whole. In a world often defined by cruelty and abandonment, Jan had proven that love, patience, and the determination to help others could create miracles that extend far beyond any individual life. What do you think enables some beings to transform their deepest pain into their greatest gift to the world? Have you ever experienced a moment when someone else's recovery inspired your own healing journey? Abandoned bull left to die by his millionaire owner. What he did next shocked everyone.